Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Zoey Watson had an excellent day, selling items rapidly and leaving every customer satisfied with something new for their wardrobe. She felt fantastic and full of energy. That evening, she shared her excitement with her husband Tom during dinner. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Tom was delighted to see her so animated. He had initially been uncertain about her decision to partner with Marjorie Lane to purchase the shop, but their investment had clearly paid off. Tom deeply loved his wife and wanted her to have everything she desired, though her tastes were modest and traditionally conservative. However, the following night, Tom delivered some unfortunate news. Due to company downsizing, he would be laid off at the end of the week. Zoey reassured him that they were not in a dire situation and that he would find another job soon. After the layoff, Tom applied to 6 different places, but each one informed him they were not hiring at the moment, though they would keep his application on file. In the first week, Tom occupied himself with small home repairs he had postponed. The second week, he mostly relaxed but began to feel restless by the end. On Saturday night, he expressed to Zoey his frustration with being stuck at home. Although he had cleaned the house, which Zoey appreciated, he needed more to do. Zoey suggested, "Why not help out at the store? We need someone to assemble the racks for the dresses. Your assistance would be invaluable." Tom agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to get out and use his skills constructively. Monday morning, he accompanied Zoey to the store and began assembling racks. After setting up 4 racks, Zoey invited him for lunch at a nearby family restaurant. Tom enjoyed the work and felt good about being productive again. Following lunch, Zoey showed him where the dress stock was kept. Tom spent the afternoon tagging prices and stocking the racks, nearly finishing 3 of them before Zoey called it a day. At dinner, Tom shared how fulfilling it was to contribute. Later that evening, while doing laundry, Zoey noticed several pairs of Tom's underwear had small holes. She discarded these and found only 1 remaining pair with holes, which she also threw out. The next morning, when Tom went to retrieve some underwear, he found none available. Zoey explained that they were all worn out and handed him a pair of her panties as a temporary solution. Although Tom was reluctant at first, he ended up wearing them. He found the blue nylon fabric surprisingly comfortable and light. At work, while finishing the 3rd rack, a customer inquired about long flowing skirts. Tom directed her to the new arrivals and noted that there was another skirt with a similar pattern in a different color. The customer tried it on and returned looking pleased. Tom complimented her appearance, and she purchased the skirt along with a blouse. During lunch, Zoey mentioned that Mrs. Davis had praised Tom's service highly. She suggested they consider making him a salesperson. After lunch, Tom completed the 4th rack of clothes about half an hour before closing. Zoey asked him to choose 2 packs of panties. He selected a pack of pastel nylon briefs and another pack of brightly colored nylon briefs, each with a lace trim around the leg openings. He handed them to Zoey, who put them in a bag and gave it to him. At home, Zoey commented that she was surprised he chose such feminine panties. Tom replied that he wanted the best for her. Zoey then shocked him by saying the panties were for him. When he asked why they didn't get him men's underwear, Zoey explained it was more economical to get them at cost rather than retail. The next morning, Tom wore the pastel blue pair, though he could have done without the lace trim. At work, he assembled the final 2 racks. While he was stocking the 1st rack, Mrs. Davis approached him. She said, "Thank you. You were right, the skirt I bought received numerous compliments. Many people said I looked younger. From now on, you can pick out whatever I'm looking for." Tom responded, "I'm glad to hear that. I just noticed that particular skirt seemed to enhance your appearance. I'm not really a salesperson here. I only set up and stock the racks. It's nice to know I made a difference." Mrs. Davis replied, "You're so kind. I'll let Marjorie know that if she wants my business, she should make you a salesperson." Tom said, "If I'm here and you need help,
I'll be happy to assist, though I must admit I don't know much about current fashion. Mrs. Davis assured him, "That's fine with me. I'll see you around." She left him and spoke with Marjorie. Tom smiled, understanding her intentions. Moments later, Mrs. Davis returned. She said, "I spoke with Marjorie, and she agrees that you can be my personal salesperson. I have a banquet to attend tonight. What would you suggest?" Tom showed her several dresses, including an orange floral one that he felt wasn't suitable. Mrs. Davis remarked that the dress might look good on him. He blushed deeply. They eventually chose a dress that pleased both of them. As Tom continued to stock the racks, Marjorie approached him. She expressed her appreciation for his help and explained that while all employees were typically required to wear store clothes, they'd made an exception for him since he wasn't directly involved with customers except for Mrs. Davis, who was a significant walking advertisement for the store. Marjorie acknowledged Tom's sense of style and mentioned that if he continued to impress, he might become a full-fledged salesperson. Tom blushed at the compliment about wearing store clothes, though he hadn't realized he was still wearing the panties. As he worked, disaster struck. He brushed against a rack, and a hook caught his slacks, tearing them from the pocket to the knee and exposing his inner thighs. Marjorie, noticing the commotion, came over immediately. Seeing the damage, she said, "You can't walk around the store like this." Tom suggested he could go home and change, but Marjorie insisted there was no need. The store had plenty of clothes, so she quickly guided him to a dressing room and instructed him to change into something else. He understood the reference to panties but complied with Marjorie's instructions. She returned with a black padded girdle and had him put it on. She adjusted the garters and handed him a pair of black nylons to wear. While he was putting them on, she fetched a black bra and slip. She helped him into the bra, fastening it in the back, and inserted foam chest forms into the cups. She then assisted him in putting on the slip. Marjorie asked, "Did you spot any dresses that you liked?" Tom replied, "Mrs. Davis mentioned that the orange dress next to the one that fell would look good on me. I'm unsure about all this. What will Zoey think? Where is she?" Marjorie explained, "Zoey is out for coffee with a supplier. I'm confident she'll appreciate what we're doing. Accidents happen." Though Tom was uncertain, he didn't feel he could argue with Marjorie, who was quite assertive. She returned with the dress, helped him zip it up, and it fit him perfectly. Marjorie had considered a smaller size but was pleased with her choice. She guided him to a set of 3 mirrors. Tom looked at his reflection and, apart from his face and hair, could easily pass as a woman inspecting her outfit. Marjorie told him to relax for a few minutes and left to fetch a pair of yellow and green sandals with thin straps and a modest 1.5-inch heel. They were comfortable for walking. Marjorie asked him to stay put and excused herself. When she came back, she informed him that she had arranged to enhance his look even further. Tom was puzzled until Marjorie directed him to go 2 doors down and ask for Agnes. Unsure what to expect, Tom found Agnes's beauty spot and entered. Agnes greeted him immediately. Agnes said, "Welcome, I'm Agnes. Marjorie has filled me in on everything. You're in good hands. I have everything needed to make you look stunning. Please, have a seat." Tom sat in the chair, and Agnes draped a floral cape around him. She then led him to a sink to shampoo his hair. Tom mentioned he had planned to get a haircut but had postponed it. Agnes assured him that only a minor trim was needed for what she had in mind. While Tom held his fingers in a bowl of liquid, she trimmed his hair. He was curious about this step but chose not to ask. Soon, Agnes was rolling his hair and applying a strong-smelling lotion on the rollers, covering it with a bonnet and turning on warm air. She then took his right hand, cleaned and shaped his fingernails, and, dissatisfied with their appearance, applied false nails and painted them. The result was light pink nails with dark red roses, extending a half-inch beyond his fingers. Agnes then informed him that the next step might be a bit uncomfortable. She began plucking his eyebrows, causing him to tear up initially, though the discomfort soon lessened. She wondered about the necessity of the eyebrow work as Agnes applied long false eyelashes, eyeshadow, foundation, and blush, commenting on his high cheekbones. Lastly, she outlined his lips and applied lipstick. It was time to remove the bonnet. Agnes spent another 10 minutes perfecting his hair. As she worked, she explained how her shop complemented the dress store. Customers often needed both a new look and a new outfit, creating a mutually beneficial relationship. She mentioned that she offers discounts to the store's employees and in return, the store provides her with discounts on her purchases. When Agnes removed the cape and turned him towards the mirror, Tom was stunned by his reflection. He saw a woman who, while not a beauty queen, looked elegant and poised. It was hard for him to believe that the person in the mirror was him, with no hint of his former self remaining. Agnes complimented him, saying he looked beautiful, and he had to agree. She handed him a case containing all the cosmetics she had used. Tom was eager to return to the shop but also reluctant. Summoning his courage, he made his way back, startled by how loud his heels sounded on the sidewalk. Even the smallest noise seemed amplified in the quiet. He entered the store and saw Zoey assisting a customer. She glanced at him briefly but didn't seem to recognize him. Marjorie approached, guiding him to the back of the store. Marjorie said, "I did some calculations, and with what you've earned so far, you still have $252 left. Why don't you pick out some more dresses?" Tom asked, "Why more dresses? I can change when I get home." Marjorie replied, "Everything you're wearing is from the store. You're now a salesperson. We get name tags made just down the street. Here's yours." She pinned the name tag on him, which read Jamie. Tom felt a bit embarrassed but accepted it. Marjorie then called Zoey over. Marjorie said, "You were busy with Mrs. Adams, so I couldn't tell you. Let me show you. This is Jamie, our new salesperson. Help him pick out some dresses. Oh, and I forgot to mention the commission from Mrs. Davis. Jamie, you have $312 to spend. Enjoy." Zoey greeted him, saying, "Hi Jamie, I'm Zoey. Nice to meet you. Oh my God, is that really you, Thomas?" Tom confirmed it, and Zoey, though initially shocked, quickly got over it. She told him that while Marjorie had mentioned getting him into a dress, she hadn't believed it. Tom asked if he could change at home, but Zoey insisted it wasn't necessary, saying he looked great as he was. She then guided him to a rack of office-style dresses he hadn't noticed before, helping him select 3. Next, she picked out additional bras and slips for him and led him to the shoe area. Although their shoe selection was new and limited, Zoey found 2 pairs that matched many of the outfits they had chosen. After removing all the tags, she instructed him to put the clothes in the car. Returning to the store, Tom was surprised to see Mrs. Davis back. She approached him, saying she needed a neck scarf for her banquet that night. As he sorted through the scarves, Mrs. Davis chatted with him. She said, "I'm so glad you took my advice on that dress. It looks fantastic on you. We have similar coloring, but yours looks much fresher. I'm thrilled they made you a full-time salesperson. I love your hair. Who did it?" He told Zoey about Agnes, and she said she'd check if Agnes had time for her. After selecting a few items, Mrs. Davis left the store pleased. As he straightened clothes on a rack, he felt uneasy. He was a man in a dress, and he wondered how Zoey would react. He questioned how he had ended up in this situation and how he would get out of it, especially after everything Agnes had done to him at the beauty shop. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions. With 2 more sales to go before quitting time, he asked Marjorie about his pants, as he had his wallet in them. She handed him a purse, informing him that everything from his pants was now in it. On the way home, he wanted to ask Zoey how she felt about his situation, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Finally, at dinner, he decided he needed to address the issue before his emotions became overwhelming. He asked Zoey, "How do you feel about what's happened to me? Do you find it strange seeing your husband in a dress?" Zoey replied, "Marjorie told me she would get you into a dress. I didn't believe her, but here we are. I think she's happy with the results. I don't find you disgusting. You're my husband, and I love you no matter what you're wearing. If you enjoy it, that's fine. How did you feel when you looked in the mirror? He answered, I felt pretty. I can't quite describe it, but I had a good feeling inside. I know it's not typical for a man to feel that way, but that's how I felt. Walking back to the store, I heard the heels on the sidewalk and felt like I was walking on a golden path. When Mrs. Davis said I looked nice in the dress, I felt proud, though I'm not sure what to call the feelings I had. Aren't you expecting me to be more of a man? Zoey said, you're more than enough of a man for me. I appreciate that we can talk openly about our feelings. This is new for us, and I'm glad you want to discuss it. There are many positives to wearing a dress that looks good on you. You'll find that you move and see the world differently. No customer has mentioned anything about you being a man. They see you as a woman and accept you as one. Embrace it and go with the flow. Do you really want to wear slacks and a shirt tomorrow? He admitted, I'm all mixed up. I don't know, and that's what bothers me. As a man, I should be upset about wearing a dress, but I don't feel that way. I actually like how the dress swirls when I turn and the softness of the material against my skin. Zoey said, then it's settled. Tomorrow you'll wear a dress and be a salesperson. The more you wear a dress, the more confident you'll become. Plus, you avoid the less pleasant aspects of womanhood, no periods or cramps. Zoey's laughter made him realize how much he loved her. She was making everything easier, and he had to pause and appreciate how wonderful she truly was. Later, she helped him remove the hair from his body. Although he found the lotion stung, she told him it was that or body wax. She also surprised him with 2 baby doll pajamas for bed. The next day, after finishing stocking a final rack, he was browsing the merchandise when he got his first customer. He stayed busy with customers until lunchtime, and after returning, he was occupied until closing time. When Marjorie tallied up the day's receipts, he was the top salesperson, which made him feel good about his job. That evening, Zoey mentioned that Thursdays always seemed busy because women preparing for the weekend liked to get their wardrobes sorted early. She expected Friday to be similarly busy, with those who were less particular or knew exactly what they wanted. Friday was so hectic that he worked straight through lunch. Mrs. Davis came in and purchased 2 outfits for the weekend. She extended an invitation for him to join her for a dinner party on Saturday night, which she was hosting for about 20 guests. He accepted, and she expressed her pleasure that her best advisor would be attending. When he told Zoey about the invitation, she said he would need an evening gown for the event. They browsed through the evening gown selection, but none of them appealed to him. Zoey liked a rose-colored gown with fringe, but he felt it wasn't quite right for him. He recalled seeing some gowns in the back and suggested they check there. They discovered a half-dozen gowns that hadn't been processed yet. One of them, a cream-colored gown with dark green trim, caught his eye. It felt like the perfect choice. When he tried it on, even Zoey had to admit it was the gown for him. It accentuated his curves and seemed to come alive as he wore it. Zoey was impressed with his fashion sense, remarking that she hadn't realized he had such a keen eye for style. She even considered asking for his opinion when buying clothes for herself. He spent the day making sales and assisting customers, once again becoming the top salesperson. Marjorie praised his performance, noting that she could always spot a good salesperson. She had confidence in his abilities, which showed in his results. On the way home, Zoey mentioned she was a bit envious. She revealed that Mrs. Davis's parties were well known and covered in the newspapers, as she was the leading socialite in town. Zoey had never been invited to one, which made Jamie wonder why he had been invited and not Marjorie or Zoey. On Saturday, he and Zoey drove separately. He planned to leave early to prepare for the party. The morning was busy with several substantial sales, and by the time he left at 3, he was exhausted. At home, he took a short nap before getting ready. As he was putting on the gown, Zoey arrived home. She congratulated him on being the top seller despite leaving early and admired how stunning he looked in the gown. She even felt a bit envious, thinking she wouldn't look as good in such a gown. Before he left, Zoey checked everything and reassured him that he looked beautiful, urging him not to worry. Despite her support, he felt a sense of apprehension, having never attended a party like this before. Upon arriving at the Davis house, a uniformed butler greeted him at the door and informed him his name wasn't on the guest list. Jamie's heart sank, and he started to turn away, but Mrs. Davis's voice stopped him. She apologized for the oversight and personally escorted him into a large room filled with guests. When she introduced him, the room fell silent, and Mrs. Davis addressed the crowd. "This is Jamie," she announced. "She is the best clothing advisor you will ever find. Please give her a warm welcome." Immediately, 3 women approached him, eager for his fashion advice. He told one that her outfit could benefit from brighter clothing. She beamed at the compliment. To another, he suggested adding a bright scarf to enhance her appearance. She mentioned she used to wear scarves but had stopped. To the 3rd woman, he said he wouldn't change a thing, praising her as looking like a model in a catalogue. When they asked where he did his consulting, he directed them to his workplace, and they all promised to visit him next week. He engaged in numerous conversations with the women at the party, and they all seemed to accept him warmly. At dinner, he found himself seated between a female attorney and the owner of the town's newspaper. Both were intrigued by his sense of style and complimented his outfit, eager to know where it was from. When he mentioned that he got it at his workplace, both expressed their intention to visit him the following week. After dinner, Mrs. Davis approached him and praised his outfit as stunning. He explained that he had found it in the back of the store, waiting to be processed. He assured her that if she didn't find the perfect dress when she visited, he would take her to the back to see if they could find something ideal. She gave him a hug and thanked him, saying she was thrilled he could attend. She mentioned that all the guests were talking about him and his style, reminiscing about the fun they used to have discussing fashion at high school parties. When he inquired why such parties had ceased, she laughed and hinted she might start hosting them again. She remarked on his creativity, and they shared a laugh. 3 hours after dinner, he said his goodbyes to Mrs. Davis, thanking her for the wonderful evening. She hugged him, kissed him on the cheek, and expressed her gratitude for his presence. When he returned home, Zoey eagerly asked about the event. He excitedly shared his experiences, expressing surprise at how well he was received by the women. Zoey was pleased for him. On Monday, while stocking a rack, Mrs. Davis came up to him again. She reiterated how delighted she was that he had attended the party and informed him that he had been the highlight of the evening. He mentioned his surprise at not having met her husband. Mrs. Davis responded, "You did meet him. He's the one you suggested needed a scarf to enhance his look. I'm here to pick one up for him." Jamie was taken aback. "That was your husband?" "Yes, that was him. He enjoys dressing up, and all the women accept him. He's a wonderful husband, and as long as he's happy, I see no harm in letting him have his fun," she said. Jamie asked why her husband didn't come to the store himself. Mrs. Davis explained that he had tried a local dress shop but had a poor experience, so he now does all his shopping through catalogs. Though it doesn't always work perfectly for sizing, he manages to find things that make him happy. Jamie offered, "Have him come see me. I'm sure we can work something out so he can shop without feeling embarrassed." Mrs. Davis thanked him and said she'd pass along the message. "Better yet, I'll let him choose his own scarf. His taste is quite different from mine," she said before leaving. Jamie returned to stocking the rack and had only managed to place 2 items when 2 women from the party approached him. He assisted them and made excellent sales. Throughout the day, he helped 5 more women from the party. At the end of the day, he shared with Zoey and Marjorie how many women from the party he had assisted. Marjorie noted that more women were seeking him out than were interested in being helped by them. They all laughed. The next morning, just after opening, a man introduced himself. "I'm Mike Davis. My wife suggested I see you for some help picking out a scarf." Jamie guided him to a selection of scarves. Mike chose 3, unable to decide on just one. He explained that he belonged to a group of crossdressers, and none of them visited local women's clothing stores. Jamie stepped away for a moment to find Zoey. He asked if he could arrange for the store to open unofficially for a couple of hours one night a week to offer private shopping for a select group. Zoey assured him it would be no problem. Returning to Mr. Davis, Jamie presented his idea. Mr. Davis was enthusiastic about it and promised to contact everyone, hoping they could attend the following evening at 7. Mr. Davis left, clearly delighted. When Jamie shared the news of the special opening with Zoey and Marjorie, both were excited and eager to help in any way they could. Jamie was pleased with how readily his proposal was accepted. The next day was relatively slow, except for a significant sale by one of Jamie's customers, the lawyer from the party. She purchased over $800 worth of clothes and thanked Jamie profusely, promising to refer everyone she knew for his advice. Jamie noticed she left the store with a noticeable bounce in her step. That evening, 10 minutes before 7, Jamie noticed someone at the door. Expecting to turn them away, he was surprised to find one of the special customers. He let them in and unlocked the doors at 7. By 10 minutes past, the store was bustling with about a dozen people. Zoey was assisting someone with an evening gown, while Jamie helped Mr. Davis choose a form-fitting dress with embroidered trim. Everything was running smoothly, and Jamie was pleased with the turnout. As the event wrapped up, people lingered and chatted. Jamie announced it was time to close. One man asked if this would become a regular event. Jamie inquired about their preferences for future openings, and the suggestion of once every 2 weeks was made. They agreed to set up the next event for 2 weeks later, and everyone left satisfied. When they tallied the receipts, Zoey and Marjorie were astonished to see they had sold over $2,000 worth of clothes. They were thrilled and praised Jamie extensively. Marjorie offered to treat them to a snack as a thank you. On Thursday, Mrs. Davis returned and invited Jamie to an old-fashioned pajama party, reminiscent of their high school days. Jamie hesitated, mentioning he didn't like to leave his wife. Mrs. Davis suggested he bring her along. Jamie introduced Zoey to Mrs. Davis, who was surprised to learn Zoey was his wife. The two women reminisced about high school parties before Mrs. Davis departed, saying she would see them on Saturday night. Zoey remarked, "You're going to need better chest forms than those foam ones. We don't have what you need here. Let me see what I can find." Soon after, Zoey returned with good news. "I found some for you. Agnes has them and can help you right away. Go there now." Jamie went to Agnes, who fitted him with chest forms so realistic that it was hard to tell where they ended and his skin began. When he returned to the store, his chest movements were convincingly realistic. Zoey noticed and suggested that if he wanted less jiggle, he might need a different bra. Jamie replied, "I'm not sure. These are heavy enough. The jiggle feels strange but interesting, like my chest is alive in a way I can't quite describe." Zoey understood what he meant and left him smiling to herself. Half an hour before closing, she reminded him that he would need to pick out some nightgowns, as his pajamas probably wouldn't fit and he would need one for the pajama party. He selected 3 nightgowns that were highly feminine and 4 baby doll outfits, each adorned with lace and ruffles. Zoey was surprised by how feminine his choices were, thinking each piece practically screamed "Make love to me tonight." On Friday, Zoey returned from lunch carrying a bag. She asked Jamie to join her in the dressing room, where she pulled out an unfamiliar item. "This is a gaff," Zoey explained. "It will conceal your male parts. You can't be in pajamas surrounded by women with something swinging between your legs." She helped him put it on and mentioned that he would now need to sit when using the bathroom and remember to wipe afterward. Jamie felt awkward but kept his feelings to himself. The true impact of the gaff became apparent when he used the bathroom. This was definitely a new experience. Saturday night, they arrived at the Davises' home and received a warm welcome. Jamie and Zoey quickly joined in, laughing and enjoying themselves with the other women. When Jamie noticed Mike was missing, Mrs. Davis explained that Mike was on a fishing trip in Canada with friends. The women stayed up until midnight before heading to bed. Jamie and Zoey shared a double bed, and they both remarked on how much fun they had. They were pleasantly surprised when they woke up at 9:30 the next morning, having never slept in so late. During breakfast, the conversation flowed easily, and once again, Jamie was the center of attention. Mrs. Davis showered him with praise. After the meal, she pulled Jamie aside to thank him for arranging the special shopping hours for her husband. She shared that her husband had said it was the most fun he'd had in years and that Jamie was a hero for his treatment of the shopping group. Jamie thanked her sincerely, expressing that her support gave him strength and meant a lot to him. Mrs. Davis kissed him on the cheek and told him to reach out if he ever needed anything before heading to Zoey. Mrs. Davis told Zoey she thought Jamie was a special person and praised Zoey for guiding him. She advised Zoey to hold on to him, saying she'd never find someone as caring. Zoey agreed wholeheartedly. At home, Zoey couldn't stop praising Mrs. Davis and how much she enjoyed the party, saying it brought back wonderful memories. On Monday, at the end of the workday, Marjorie made an important announcement. As the business manager handling financial matters, Marjorie revealed that the vacant store space between theirs and Agnes's would become part of their store. She had negotiated to lease the space and arrange for it to be remodeled to match their theme. The new section would be called Jamie's Room, and Jamie would be responsible for selecting the merchandise. Zoey and Jamie were both thrilled and surprised. Marjorie said it was the least they could do, given how much Jamie had boosted their business. She handed Jamie a stack of supplier catalogs for merchandise selection. Jamie had a few ideas to expand their offerings, and Marjorie encouraged him to do whatever he wanted, declaring it was his empire and he was the emperor. To celebrate, the three of them went to a steakhouse for dinner. During the meal, Zoey turned to Marjorie and said, "Marjorie, I never officially thanked you for getting him into a dress. I want to thank you now. Your action brought us closer and helped us discover a vibrant, exciting love that we wouldn't have found otherwise." Marjorie replied, "I was worried I might upset you, but I knew he'd be a good salesperson. I just didn't expect him to be such a natural. He's built a loyal customer base who values his opinion. I'm thrilled everything turned out so well. Seeing both of you so happy has really boosted my self-esteem." Jamie spoke up, "Marjorie, I never imagined wearing women's clothes before you got me into them. I was stunned until I returned from Agnes's, and by then, it was too late. I promised myself I'd be back in men's clothes faster than you can say Jack Robinson, but the longer I wore these outfits, the more natural it felt. Maybe it's fortunate that the only men I encounter are cross-dressers who enjoy soft fabrics. I've forgotten how men's clothes feel now. I'm not sure I could switch back. I should be the one thanking you, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you." As he finished, Zoey and Marjorie both had tears in their eyes. They realized how far he'd come and wondered if they might have pushed him too hard. However, they now saw that he bore no resentment towards them. That evening, at home, Jamie asked Zoey if she was genuinely happy with him wearing dresses. She assured him she was content, as she had him both as a husband and a girlfriend. She expressed pride in his achievements and encouraged him not to worry about their relationship. Jamie continued to wrestle with his feelings about wearing dresses and makeup, questioning his masculinity. The next day, Joe Simons, an old co-worker, came into the dress shop. Joe approached Jamie and asked, "My wife was here yesterday and thought she saw you in a dress. What's going on? Why are you wearing a dress?" Jamie replied, "I'm working here. The dress is part of the job. Last week, I earned over $600 in commissions alone, not including my salary." "How much did you make last week?" Joe said, "Well, unemployment isn't much. I'm still looking for work." "I can't believe you'd wear a dress for any reason." Jamie explained, "It's not so bad. Dresses are light and airy. I thought I'd hate it, but it's not that bad. I get to help women choose their clothes, and the job isn't physically demanding. I don't think most women realize I'm a man, and those who do don't seem to care. They treat me well, and I provide good service. I never considered myself a salesperson, but this is going so well that I'm surprised I hadn't tried it before." Joe asked, "Do they have any openings?" I wouldn't mind helping women pick out clothes. Jamie said, No, I don't think you're suited for dress sales. But if something opens up for a different role or maintenance, I'll put in a good word for you. How does that sound? Joe replied, That sounds good. I can't see myself working in a dress anyway. It takes more guts than I have. I never expected to see you in a dress. My wife said she had to look closely to recognize you. She only figured out it was you when she got home. If you can fool Alice that easily, you could probably fool anyone. Good luck with whatever you do. You're doing better than I am, that's for sure. Joe's acceptance made Jamie feel better about himself. He knew that colleagues have a strong influence on self-perception. As he watched two men working on removing part of the wall between the two stores, he imagined them in dresses and laughed at the thought. To avoid any awkwardness, he stayed clear of them. On Saturday night, after checking the register and completing the bank deposit, Marjorie announced that they had just had their best week ever. She suggested celebrating at the best steakhouse in town. Zoey and Jamie caught her enthusiasm and joined in the celebration. As they dined, Marjorie asked Jamie about his plans for the catalogue items. He told her he intended to expand the swimsuit selection and the evening dress section. He also wanted to set up a dedicated area for bras and foundations, noting that a few customers had inquired about waist slimmers and bust enhancers. Marjorie agreed that the swimsuit expansion could be accommodated in the original store, as some of the stock would move to the new area. She instructed Jamie to order whatever swimsuits he believed would sell. Marjorie mentioned that their bra and foundation section wasn't performing well, but she trusted Jamie's judgment. He was confident they could boost sales with his ideas. He reminded Marjorie that they would be leaving for vacation the following morning. When she asked where they were going, Jamie told her they were returning to a resort they had visited before and that he was looking forward to fishing. Marjorie wished them a great vacation, believing they deserved it. On their way home, they stopped to get Jamie's fishing license. The attendant requested his driver's license to verify residency, and Jamie didn't notice that the attendant had marked the female box on the license when he completed the transaction. The next morning, they departed for their vacation. Zoey had packed all their clothes and persuaded Jamie to wear capri pants with a white blouse featuring lace trim and bell sleeves. Upon arriving at the resort, Zoey checked them in and led them to their cottage. Jamie asked her to remove his chest so he could change into jeans and a shirt, but Zoey had not packed any men's clothing, assuming he would prefer to continue wearing what had become familiar to him. Jamie looked at her, choosing not to argue. They went swimming, and Jamie wore a blue one-piece suit with a broad red stripe. After swimming, he lay down on a blanket, and a young man approached, asking if he could share it. Jamie explained that someone else was already sharing the blanket, and the young man left. Later, they went to the resort's small bar for a drink. While they were enjoying themselves, two young men entered. Jamie recognized one as the young man who had asked about sharing the blanket. The young man appeared to be a few years younger than Jamie. The two young men played pool, and Jamie and Zoey continued to chat and drink. When they finished their game, one of the young men put money in the jukebox, and a slow song began to play. Before Jamie could react, the young man approached him, lifted him from his stool, and began to dance with him. The young man introduced himself and asked Jamie his name while holding him close. When the dance ended, Jamie quickly finished his drink and suggested to Zoey that they leave. Zoey, laughing, asked why. They left with Zoey still chuckling heartily, while Jamie found it less amusing. Zoey teased Jamie, saying, "You should have danced with him a bit longer. Maybe by the end of the week, he'd propose to you. You two made a nice couple." Jamie retorted, "That's not funny. He had me in a tight grip, and I couldn't get away. He's stronger than a gorilla. What was I supposed to do?" Zoey laughed, adding, "You could have given him a kiss at the end of the dance." She was laughing so hard that tears formed in her eyes. They returned to their cottage and decided to visit a nearby supper club. The young man who served them was attentive and appreciative, as he didn't often get to serve such attractive women. They left him a generous tip. Back at their cottage, they played Scrabble until bedtime. They made love deeply and passionately, falling into a deep sleep afterward. The next day, they visited an amusement park, continuing to enjoy each other's company and their time together. On their way back to the cottage, they took a wrong turn and drove for quite a while before realizing they were lost. Eventually, they came upon Silver Lake Road, which led to the resort. Jamie turned in what he hoped was the right direction, driving past a supper club they hadn't seen before. 5 miles later, they arrived at the resort, and Jamie remarked that they'd taken the scenic route. The next night, they decided to try out the new supper club they had spotted earlier. They pulled into the parking lot, which had about 6 cars parked. Upon entering, they were surprised to hear Jamie's name called out. It was Mrs. Davis. She asked, "What are you doing up here? Who's minding the store?" Jamie explained their situation and asked what brought Mrs. Davis there. She mentioned that they had a summer home about 6 miles away and were spending 2 weeks enjoying nature and the fresh air. Mrs. Davis invited them to join her and her husband for dinner, noting that the supper club was famous for its barbecued ribs. They all ordered the ribs and were soon laughing and having a great time. The ribs were so delicious that Jamie and Zoey managed to finish them despite their initial doubts but had to pass on dessert. Mr. Davis was the only one who indulged in the banana creme pie. After dinner, the Davis invited them to their home, and they gladly accepted. Following the Davis to their place, Jamie and Zoey were impressed by the grand entryway and the huge log house. Inside, Mr. Davis excused himself to change, while Jamie and Zoey chatted with Mrs. Davis. When Mr. Davis returned, he was wearing a flowing dress with a skirt that swirled as he walked. His light makeup made him look convincingly feminine from a distance. The group discussed the store and Jamie's upcoming improvements. Mrs. Davis was enthusiastic about the changes, and Mr. Davis was thrilled to learn that his group of friends could shop during special hours. Before they left, Mrs. Davis invited them to go shopping with her the next day. She mentioned a small store owned by a woman who made her own dresses. They agreed to meet at 10 the following morning. The next morning, they arrived ready to shop. Mrs. Davis drove them to the small country dress shop. During the drive, they discussed various styles. Upon arrival, Mrs. Davis introduced them to Lydia Lewis, the store's owner. As they browsed, Jamie and Zoey admired the well-crafted clothes and the reasonable prices. Jamie considered discussing with Mrs. Lewis the possibility of selling some of her dresses in their store. His attention was drawn to a rack of aprons adorned with ruffles and lace, and he decided he needed to speak with her about stocking these items as well. Approaching Mrs. Lewis, Jamie asked, "Could I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course," she replied. Jamie continued, "We run a women's clothing store and I believe we could sell just about anything I've seen here. Could we discuss a potential arrangement to carry your products?" Mrs. Lewis responded, "I try to create items I think will sell, but business can be slow at times. I'm sure we can work something out." At that moment, Mike emerged from the dressing room in a dress loaded with ruffles. Mrs. Davis said, "Michelle, you don't need another dress. Do you have any without ruffles?" "Oh, well, I suppose you deserve a new dress. Go ahead and get it." Mike left smiling. Jamie picked out a cute sundress and an apron with a full bib and skirt, eager to show Marjorie the high quality of the items. He thought the sundress would look great on him. By the time they left, it was lunchtime. Mrs. Davis took them to a quaint family restaurant where they enjoyed a meal. She mentioned a souvenir shop they shouldn't miss after lunch. Once they finished eating, they headed to the shop. Jamie found a pair of long, dangling earrings he liked and a t-shirt with a mermaid design. They also visited a store across the street specializing in moccasins, where Jamie chose a pair of white moccasins adorned with bead trim. As they made their way back to the Davis place, Jamie was excited about the new dress contact. He was confident that any dresses Mrs. Lewis sent would sell well. He felt very satisfied with how the day had turned out. Back at the cottage, they were both exhausted. They lay down but soon found themselves making love. After a short nap, they had a light supper. Jamie couldn't hide his excitement about the new dresses arriving soon. Zoey shared in his enthusiasm and was pleased to see how happy he was. That evening, Jamie sat on the porch, gazing at the lake, and decided to go fishing. As he fished, he pondered his situation. He wondered if it was right for him to continue wearing dresses and how Zoey felt about it. Despite their improved relationship, he was apprehensive about bringing up the topic. He loved the feel of the dress he was wearing and knew he needed to discuss it with Zoey, though he was unsure of the outcome. A strong bite interrupted his thoughts, and he hooked a good-sized walleye. Satisfied that it would provide a meal for both him and Zoey, he pulled up the anchor and headed for shore. After cleaning and wrapping the fish, he showed it to Zoey, telling her it would be their lunch the next day. He poured lemonade for both of them and sat at the table with Zoey. "While I was fishing, I did a lot of thinking. I need your input on something," he said. Zoey, sensing the gravity of the conversation, urged him to continue. Jamie hesitated, then said, "I'm wondering how you would feel if I continued wearing dresses. I've really come to enjoy the way they make me feel. I know you married a man, not someone who wears dresses, but I'd like to keep wearing them. Could you continue to be with me if I did?" Zoey asked him to wait a moment. She went into the bedroom and emerged with a red slinky silk dress with a side slit. "In answer to your question," she said, "yes, I can continue to live with you and love you if you wear dresses. You've given me a gift I'd hoped for, so here's one for you. This dress is perfect for you, and you can wear it tomorrow evening. We'll go get more of those delicious ribs." Jamie stood up, embraced her, and they shared a heartfelt kiss. They both felt closer than ever, knowing their future together was bright and promising.